In the late 8th century, a collection of Arabic Romance languages emerged in the Iberian Peninsula. These speakers, ruled by the Islamic Emirate of Córdoba, became more and more common in the area. These tongues are labeled as the Mozarabic language. Who were these people of this tongue and land? How did this collection of languages sound? And what happened to Mozarabic when it met its end? Welcome to the LangInfo Podcast, where we have an adventure into the history of dying and extinct languages, and sometimes even rare tongues. I am Matthew Malcolm, today's host. Every episode, we take the time to search into a specific language, its history, orthography, geography, and more. We learn why these languages are dying, became extinct, and or what they evolved into. We imagine how the peoples of these languages lived and who they were. Join me, if you will, and let's learn about a new language. The Iberian Peninsula, another name for modern-day Spain and Portugal, can be known for its vast history of language diversity. Languages such as Spanish and Portuguese are the dominators. However, smaller languages such as Catalan, Valencian, Balear, Galician, and Aquitano Romance are spoken by smaller communities. Previously, in more ancient times, languages such as Navarro-Aragonese and Mozarabic existed. Mozarabic shall be our focus for today. Mozarabic, linguistically named Andalusi Romance, was a collection of languages considered in the Romance language family. Romance refers to languages that emerged from Latin, such as French, Italian, and Spanish. Mozarabic, now an extinct collection of languages, were spoken in what would become modern-day southern to mid-Spain and Portugal. I will post a map on our Instagram account for a visualization of where I am talking about. However, before we dive into the language itself, we must first discover who the people were. The people of this region were ruled by Muslims of the Islamic Emirate of Córdoba. These Muslims lived in their conquered Iberian territories of Al-Andalus, located in southeastern Spain and Portugal. They bordered the Carolingians in the Ardennes, the Kingdom of Leon in the northwest of the peninsula, and were across from the Iberia Emirate in northern Africa. Again, a photo of the region's empires will be with the previous image on our Instagram. Before the Emirate of Córdoba, another collection of rulers conquered the peninsula. I am of course talking about the Umayyad Caliphate. This caliphate was one of the four created after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. At their peak, they had conquered most of the Middle East, northern Africa, and Iberia. These people spoke mostly Arabic and would spread Arabic into Europe. This empire would eventually fall victim to revolt and collapse. What emerged were many new emirates and caliphates. Returning to Córdoba, Mozarabic seems to have begun in the 5th century AD. This was during the rule of the Umayyad. As regimes changed to the Emirate of Córdoba during the 8th century, around 756 AD, the Emir Abd al-Rahman I wanted to break away from the Umayyad dynasty, who were now under control of the Abbasids, who had overthrown them in the Damascus in 750 AD. This would result in a more isolated nation on the peninsula who would focus on themselves instead of their predecessors. The name Mozarabic itself describes the people who spoke the language. These people, the Mozarabs, developed their name from the Andalusi Arabic word mustarab. This word originates from the classical Arabic word mustarib, which translates to who adopts the ways of the Arabs. This applies to the fact that these people came from the traditions of other Arabs and the Arab peoples of the previous caliphate. Now, let's travel back to the years of these people. Imagine, if you will, that you are a new citizen of Córdoba. Perhaps you are a voyager. You know standard Arabic, and want to ask the locals what they are speaking. To you, they sound a little strange. Not only their accents, but their words, they sound foreign. However, most of their writing is in the Arabic script, so what is the issue? You ask a nearby local about what language they speak. He replies, "We speak in Latinus." Now, you may be confused, as I had said before that they were of Arab descent. This is true, but the language was not actually of full Arabic origination. You see, there was another player on the field, but not present at the time: Rome. The Romans had conquered most of the Mediterranean and spread the Latin tongue across Europe and northern Africa. Naturally, the peoples of these areas would develop Latin tongues under Roman rule. Iberia was no different. Latinus was not the only name given, though. Some writers and scholars refer to it as Latini, as there was no distinction between Latin and true Romance at the time. Another interesting name that was given was Al-Ahamia, meaning strange or foreign. This may come from the fact that many Arabs had not heard Latin, and especially Latinus, before. These names all fall into our story perfectly. However, there is one more label, given by 19th century Spanish scholars. They labeled Latinus as Cristiano or Loga Cristiana, meaning the language of the Christians. You may be confused again, and trying to guess on why the Spanish gave it this label. Were we not? For there is a simple answer. Dhimis. What is a dhimmi? Well, to put it simply, it's a historical term for non-Muslims who lived in an Islamic state. This term means protected person. They were given protection of their property, life, and freedom of religion. In Córdoba, there were many Christians living under the Islamic rule. These Christians, along with Mulades, native Iberians who converted to Islam, Jewish people, and possibly some of the ruling powers, spoke what we now call Mozarabic. Mozarabic tongues were not of high culture or royalty, such as Latin and Arabic. Therefore, there was no written script developed for it. Instead, the Arabic script was used to fill in the gaps. Latin writing and even Hebrew scripts do exist as well. Much of the surviving written Mozarabic material are found in khariyas, or choruses, of Andalusi lyrical compositions known as muwashas. These are written usually in Arabic, but some Hebrew versions exist as well. This poses a problem when modern scholars attempt to interpret these pieces. The Arabic versions did not reliably indicate vowels, forcing substitutions. This causes inaccuracies when being translated. They did, however, rely on diacritical points, which are usually lost or distorted when copying manuscripts. This can cause a similar problem as before. It also rendered some sounds as being similar or identical, such as r, w, and d in English, not when spoken out loud, but when read. As for Roman sounds, Arabic had no way to indicate some unique sounds, such as ts and z. As for the Hebrew scripts, almost all of the same problems still occurred. Moving on to the orthography of the languages. Keep in mind, all of these languages share common attributes. There are very little meager differences within each from each other. You can also include differences in accents and even possible dialects in some regions. This is why all of these languages are considered Mozarabic. The following is some of what is considered to be unique in all of Mozarabic. My pronunciation is not perfect, and it will never be. However, to save us all the embarrassment, I will only pronounce what I am confident in. As for orthography, Latin stressed a and e became diphthongs. This means that both sounded very similar to each other, almost exact. Possibly just a. The Latin k became palatalized. This means that the palate of your mouth, the tissue right above your front teeth, would slightly change how the letter is pronounced. This technique is common in Slavic languages such as Russian and Ukrainian and such others. Not only was the pronunciation changed, so did the grammar. In many languages, to make a noun agree with gender or number, a process called declension occurs. In English, this only occurs to plurals, when we add an S to a noun. In other languages, there may be some or many more endings. In Latin, for many nouns that were feminine, one would add an AS to the end of it. In Mozarabic, that AS shifted into an ES. It is not fully certain what the language exactly sounded like. As said before, many substitutions and interpretations were made, but are potentially inaccurate. Along with my meager attempts at pronunciation, I cannot fully bring to life how Mozarabic truly sounded, unfortunately. However, there are many talented individuals who have tried. Calixtus on YouTube has many of these qarias on his channel. A more regular sounding video titled The Sound of Mozarabic by I Love Languages is also available on there. If you want a good idea of how Mozarabic sounded, I suggest giving them a listen. Alas, not all languages will last forever, as they eventually become extinct, usually merging or evolving into others. The same can be said for empires, dynasties, and kingdoms. The end of Mozarabic, starting to take place around the 11th and 12th centuries, was enduring and a bit complex. First, you need to understand that many events, which I will explain, took a toll on the last history on the language. To start off, Andalusi Arabic started to become more popular in many of the Arab communities in Córdoba. It got to the point where it became the standard in much of the region. The 781-year period from the Umayyad reign to the far upcoming fall of Granada in 1492 brought a historical event known as the Reconquista, or Reconquest. This reconquest was done by the Christian communities of Iberia and beyond. The Crusaders, wanting to spread their ideology, clashed with the Muslim emirates in the area. After a long struggle, the Christians eventually won the Battle of Covadonga around 718 AD in the northern Hispania mountains. The victors, led by a nobleman named Pelagius, established the independent Christian kingdom of Asturias. Eventually, the Christian kingdoms and armies would subdue all of Iberia, and with it, all Muslim and Arab influence in the peninsula. Mozarabic, becoming less and less common, merged with its Castilian neighbors. This chain of events and evolutions would eventually create the Spanish and Portuguese languages that we know of today. Though, even before all of Iberia was conquered by the Christians, some communities, such as the Emirate of Granada, lost Mozarabic long before the end. In the end, Mozarabic, now merged with Castilian, became extinct by the 13th century. Another century later, Granada would fall to the Christian armies in the north, and with it, Muslim influence on the peninsula would cease forever, being instead dominated by Christian influence for the rest of history. As we can see, Mozarabic's history on the Iberian Peninsula is fascinating, a long, vast life for its people. However, such as with all languages, they will change and die off one day. No language will last forever, not even modern-day English, Spanish, French, or others. To leave off on a good note, Mozarabic forever shaped the Spanish and Portuguese languages, and was a majorly positive piece of their history. I hope you all enjoyed and learned something new on this episode of the LangInfo Podcast. Undergoing this research, I certainly did. If you want to listen to more, follow this podcast on Instagram at LangInfoPod. This is where you can also view photos of what I discuss in the audios. You can also give a rating on your preferred podcast library. I truly appreciate it. And with that, I will hopefully see you all again for the next episode. Goodbye, and take care, as always.